Oh, that's right. Magic Mike's not here, Colby. We have theme music for Carolyn. That's my fault. That's all right. That's okay, my sister. That's okay. On the phone with me every Wednesday at 8:06, Carolyn Bourdeaux, former congresswoman from Gwinnett County. She joins me every Wednesday at 8:06. So she wrote, welcome, Carolyn, to the Shelley Winter Show.
Hello. Good to be here.
So here's the title. Here's the title of this op-ed. So Carolyn Bourdeaux first came on the Shelley Winter Show back before Joe Biden stepped down from running for president. And Carolyn Bourdeaux, and she was on my show weekly after this point, she was the first person to openly say in an op-ed in a major newspaper in a major swing state, Georgia, that Joe Biden needs to step down. And he did a couple days later. And so we've been talking every Wednesday since then. This is the headline to the article. Democrats need to ditch identity politics if they want to win elections. Here's the subhead. By defining the party around a struggle between the oppressed and the oppressor, Democrats are drawing lines around who is in and out of the coalition. I just want to read one thing and then you start talking, Carolyn. It's not for a lack of distress about the havoc of the Trump administration. Rather, I suspect the values and a worldview of the Democrat Party have slid deeply out of alignment with where many middle-class Americans are socially, fiscally, and economically. And on top of this is a toxic identity politics culture that permeates the institutional Democratic Party, particularly in Georgia. My sister, what did you mean by all of that?
Okay. Well, yep. And I have written several others kind of in a similar vein about the identity politics problems that the Democratic Party faces. And I do start out pointing out something we've talked about on the show a number of times, which is that everybody needs to realize the Democrats have a 30% favorability rating. That's for the brand of the Democrats, right? Now, it's not that Trump, who's kind of separate from Republicans, right? It's not that they have strong ones, okay? Let's be really clear here. It's not that they're strong, but the Democratic Party is below them, despite, a lot of concerns that people have about what's going on. So starting with that, and then, moving on from there. And one of the things that I've seen out there is the reaction to Jeff Duncan among, who's a, white man, former Republican, who has switched to the Democratic Party. And the reaction among the party faithful is, this is, Jeff Duncan represents racism among the Democratic Party if they, think that he's somebody who should be a candidate. The white Democrats are racist if they support Jeff Duncan, in essence. And I just, this is a real problem, that's how people are treated in the Democratic Party, and I just was tired of it. So that was what prompted this.
That's what prompted this, right? And you saw a particular post, because I've seen a lot of these posts as well. What's interesting to me, and I want to ask you your thoughts on this, because you kind of don't talk about this in the op-ed, but what's interesting to me is people are not mad that he's a former Republican turned Democrat. They're mad that he's a white guy.
There's both in these posts. But it starts out with, this is institutional racism, that white liberals think that Jeff Duncan is an appropriate candidate for the Democratic Party. That's kind of the opening line. And they do talk about his conservative policies as well, which he does need to defend, right? He does need to explain, where he's coming from on that. But this underlying, and it is constant of this battle and this use of racism as kind of a cudgel, it undermines, it creates a toxic environment. It undermines the coalition. And it has really been very destructive to the Georgia Democratic Party.
And when you talk about using race as a cudgel, you're not talking about using race as a cudgel when they say attack me for supporting Trump as an African American or Brian Kemp running for governor. You're talking about within the Democrat Party, with their allies.
Right, exactly. Right. So they use it to take down white Democrats, but they also use it against Republicans. And I think one of the things that Democrats are talking about a lot now is they're saying, gosh, we need to figure out how to appeal to the white working class.
Right.
And one of the things I hear from white working class people, I talk to them about the Democratic Party, is they say, I can't be a Democrat because they think we're all racist.
Right.
And I'm like, this is not a good conversation. It is not a good way to have these conversations. And it's grounded in this identity politics worldview that is people don't realize kind of the underlying intellectual underpinnings of it, but it is very much out of critical race theory. It's kind of the bargain basement version of it, which is, there are these oppressed and oppressor groups. And, it is our job as Democrats to center ourselves on the most marginalized and to fight the oppressor. And when you frame up your political coalition that way, you're going to be in a permanent minority,
right?
Because
Absolutely.
You're not winning hearts and minds when you're out there calling everybody a racist. And I know there's real racism. I do believe in it. I've seen it, and I'm not saying that does not exist at all, but that's not all there is to these debates.
Second, there's another part of the article. Second, you say the Democratic power structure and leadership in Georgia, which largely resides amongst their elected officials, which is true, is dominated by black leaders, including every Democratic member of Congress, one senator, the leadership of both the State House and the Senate Democratic caucuses, and most of the metro area county executives and chairs. Rather than white liberals foisting a white candidate on a racially diverse electorate, the far more likely scenario is that former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, a black woman, will win the Democrat gubernatorial nomination because the Democrat primary electorate tends to favor black women. But then you go on to say, but she will lose the general. Speak about that.
Right. So, it is not any ill will here. This is just kind of the way things are almost certainly going to shake out. And we talk a lot about prognosticating, who wins, who loses, things like that. There has been polling released that shows that Keisha Lance Bottoms is ahead. The black community and electorate, which tends to vote, unlike other, kind of ethnic groups and racial groups, tends to vote with great solidarity in the Democratic primary. And additionally, white progressives, Asian progressives, all these other groups, right, also tend to support black candidates. So it is quite likely that a black woman will win the Democratic primary, just, all things equal, right? All things equal. And you see this over and over again. The primary electorate is 60% female. It is heavily dominated by the black vote in the Democratic primary. So and polling shows exactly that. She is ahead. In the general election, and I do say, yes, there is racism. Yes, there's misogyny. But one of the problems is that she was a very unpopular mayor of the city of Atlanta. She left after one term and decided not to run again. In her term, a young girl was killed at a Wendy's. Really bad things happened. Crime shot up. And that's going to be a really hard case for her to make to the general electorate. So most likely, we can project almost certainly she will probably lose the general election.
I
likely what's going to come out of this. And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
But that's anyway. I hate to say this in this sense, but that's the trajectory of where we're headed right now.
And so your point is when you lay out that case, your point becomes, and I'll say the line that I think really got your side of the fence really upset at you for is it more important that your state, this is a killer line, it's something Shelley Winter would say, is it more important that your state representative, quote, look like you, or is it more important to have affordable health insurance or a functional democracy? So are you saying that the black coalition that exists, that power structure, can't win statewide, that you've got to broaden the tent in the Democrat Party?
Well, yes, but also, and one of the challenges I faced is when I talk with black Democrats over the years, they've expressed extraordinary frustration that the issues they care about are not actually being addressed. Georgia has not expanded Medicaid. Let me give you something really basic. They've left billions of dollars on the table. Hundreds of thousands of people, I think it was 600,000 people don't have health insurance because of that choice that Georgia made. Disproportionately, it affecting the black community. And, so people are like, why isn't that changed? I've got all these representatives who look like me, but they are not making the change that I need. And what the deal is here is that it really has to come from the black leadership, right? I can say this stuff. I can say, look, you guys have to broaden the tent, but it's not going to be me who's going to be able to do that. It is these members of Congress. It is our senator. It is the leaders in the metro area who are going to have to find a way to build a bigger coalition if they want to deliver things that we all need. And I think, Black Democrats should start demanding that of their elected officials. They need to start asking them how they're going to find a way through, because that is who's in the leadership right now.
Right. Last question, my sister, and I appreciate you coming on. But last question I got to ask you. You end this op-ed. And I've got to ask this question because, we're sister and brother here, right? You said next every Democrat should write down the following words and put it on a Post-it note or a piece of paper where they can see it every day. I want to win. First of all, explain that, and then I want to tell you the last sentence of your op-ed and ask you what you're saying there. But explain, I want to win. Like they're losing. What do you mean by that?
They're losing, right? So one of the things I suggest is you've got to ditch this identity politics. You have to look at who is going to bring, who's able to deliver the things that we need. And, stop looking at the color of people's skin. It could be a Black person. It could be a white person. I don't know. But you need the coalition that's going to win. And you need healthcare. We need healthcare. All of us. We need lower energy prices. We need, stronger education for our children. We need some real things. And so I want to win, not just, elect somebody because they're diverse or they check some kind of identity box.
The last sentence, we're on the phone with Carolyn Bourdeaux. She joins us every day. She's got an op-ed, in the AJC today, and it's just pure fire for me and for a lot of people who are upset. Some people are happy. Some people quietly reached out to me and told me, I'm glad you're going to have her on because this needs to be said, but they can't say it publicly, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. But the last sentence, then they should give Jeff Duncan a second look. Are you endorsing Jeff Duncan, or are you just saying because that's what started this whole op-ed?
Yes, I am not endorsing him. I do find him to be a very compelling candidate. I want him to show that he can win. And I think they should give him a second look and not dismiss him right off the bat because he's white, because he's a man, and because he was a former Republican. I think they need to figure out who can win and who can deliver what we need in the state.
My sister, thank you for joining me every Wednesday. My sister, you have a wonderful week. I will talk to you soon. Excellent op-ed. Well said. Well written, and well said.
Thank you.
Have a great
Have
evening.
a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Shelley Winter Show. We'll be right back.